Well, welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us this morning. You know, it could be a little bit of a challenge finding this room, first of all, but then your determination will hopefully lead to a great reward for you as a result of the conversation. My name is Bryan Albrecht. I'm the president at Gateway Technical College in southeastern Wisconsin, located sort of just between Chicago and Milwaukee on the shores of Lake Michigan. So I represent a community college, a population of about 25,000 students. And we work hopefully hand in glove with our community, like all of you, to try to provide greater opportunities for our students. It's my honor to be able to serve as the moderator for today's session, and like I shared earlier, collect some of your thoughts and ideas on how we can not only ramp up our interest in making sure that we provide great opportunities for young people, but try to find a way to build connections in those pathways systemically through the K-12 system into post-secondary and into life. So part of the work of today is not just focusing on what we do at the post-secondary level, but also finding those unique linkages and some of the best practices that you're all involved in to help kind of spur additional thought for other communities to take a look at how they can support young people in new ways as well. So thank you for being with us. So in order for us to get started, I think I should probably have our panelists introduce themselves as well. They were selected because of the work that they're doing, not only the interest in pathways, but the work that they've done throughout their career in helping build systemic change in education reform. And each of them comes from a unique perspective, and I think it's that unique perspective that's going to create the great dialogue that's going to have to happen if we're going to be successful in achieving any of the goals that we heard yesterday. So what I've asked our panelists to do is to share with you just a brief perspective, and maybe it's more of a reflection of what they heard yesterday. And I'm calling it for our group here, what was your take-home moment yesterday as a result of the conversations that we heard? After we go through the introductions in that reflection moment, then I've actually prepared one question for each of our panelists that I picked up from the conversations yesterday. And that's intentional to draw all of us back to what we heard yesterday so that we're not starting over again today. So hopefully you can kind of get yourself back in the mode of all of the great things that we heard yesterday, leveraging that experience into today, and hopefully that will carry on for some good recommendations here. So let me start by quickly introducing Doug Major. Doug has more than 25 years of experience impacting students through career in technical education, and since joining Meridian Technology Center at Stillwater, Oklahoma as its superintendent and CEO in 2008, he has led the organization in numerous achievements and has been influential across the district. Doug is also the president-elect of ACTE, the Association for Career and Technical Education. Many of you probably already know Doug from your professional experiences, but he is certainly a champion on behalf of young people and adults that go through his program. So we're going to have Doug just share a little bit of his reflection in a minute. But next to Doug is Sharon Parrott, and you might have heard Sharon yesterday. You asked a question, right, didn't you, in one of the sessions yesterday? I remember it very well. And I think it's important because the dynamics of any good conference like this is your involvement. So I hope you follow her lead and get involved in the conversation here as well. But Sharon is the Senior Vice President for External Relations and Global Responsibility for the Chief Regulatory Compliance Officer of DeVry. And I know that you must have some audience participation here as well because some of your folks are with us. But as the president of the DeVry Foundation, she directs the organization's charitable giving program. We heard that a lot yesterday. How are we going to support young people with all of the different types of services that we need? So we're very anxious to hear from Sharon and some of the great work that she's doing. Next to Sharon is a good friend of all of ours, I'm sure, Kathy Jo Manis. Many of you probably have worked with Kathy in her leadership roles with the AACC. And just as a brief introduction, she has a new position, fairly recent position. She is now the Senior Vice President for Workforce and Economic Development for the Association of Community Colleges. Previously, she directed the AACC Center for Workforce and Economic Development. Some of you might have been to the Workforce Development Institute, one of the finest conferences in the country, I think, to help stimulate the connections between workforce and education, that link that's so important for us, and Kathy leads that effort. And she also has great experience in working with the National Retail Federation, where she launched skills centers across the country. So yesterday we heard a lot about skills credentialing and certifications. Kathy is instrumental in helping that in the retail industry, and now with her new role on a much broader capacity with multiple industries. So we're excited to have Kathy with us today to share her perspective as well. Next to Kathy is John Mills. This is the first time that I've had a chance to meet John, and I'm a little jealous because there is a handout on the chairs here, so maybe the folks that are in the center aisles could take one and pass them down because there's a picture of his campus on there, and it's absolutely beautiful. So that would be a place that I would want to transfer to. But John is the 9th president of Paul Smith's College of Arts and Sciences, established way back in 1937. Paul Smith's College is a 4-year private college located in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, and you'll see by the paper there, it gives a great perspective of the work that they're doing in the area of pathways, and we're very pleased to have you with us as well. And then last but certainly not least, and I think with our all due respect and thank you for your service, Lieutenant Betts, for being with us this morning. I know it was a little bit of a trek for you to get here in the first place, but Lieutenant Betts commands the U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion in New England, located in Kittery, Maine. The unit is responsible for recruiting the most highly qualified men and women in Maine. Yesterday there was a lot of conversation about what it takes to be successful, not only leaving secondary, going to post-secondary, but the challenges that we have finding young people in general to qualify for military service. So we're glad that you're here to help us better understand what those expectations are, and I think you can provide great insight to some of the challenges you might find working with young people about how do you develop those attitudinal skills to even select the Army or any of our services. So thanks for being with us. So with that brief introduction, hopefully they'll share just a little bit more about their interest in this whole area with you. I would like all the panelists just to take a minute or two to talk about your take-home moment from yesterday, what you think yesterday will do for you as you go back to continue to inspire your organization. I'm going to start with Doug.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel and appreciate you all navigating the hotel to find the room in this remote location. Bill asked us to talk a little bit about context, about why we're here on the panel, and so I want to start with that. I represent a shared time technology center in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a little bit unique in our structure of education in that we have 3 distinct branches of public education. We have K-12, we have higher ed, but we also have a 3rd branch that's dedicated to career and technical education. And through that division, we have 29 technology centers scattered around the state, 57 campuses, and they're all schools of choice. And I say that because we were established, each campus was established by a vote of the people living within that district. And our primary financial support comes from ad valorem, or property taxes, from within that district. So we have a real local mission. Our mission is to serve the business and industry and the educational needs of the citizens living primarily within the geographic region we serve. Now that said, we also know that people who are born in our district won't stay in our district forever. And so we also look at demographic trends, we look at where the job needs are, and we provide the educational programming that will help individuals get there. We are a shared time center in terms of secondary students. We have high school students that spend half of their day on our campus to get the career and technical education, but we're the primary location for many post-secondary students in Oklahoma. And post-secondary students have the opportunity to come to our campus to get very specific career majors, as we refer to them, that are designed to meet the needs of employers in the area. At Meridian Technology Center, we have 71 career majors, but then we also have many short-term offerings for business and industry. Our programs are developed in cooperation with business and industry. We have business and education councils that meet regularly to identify and define and update the curriculum so that we're ensured that we're meeting the employer needs in terms of a highly skilled, highly qualified workforce. One of our challenges in Oklahoma right now is the fact that we have a very low unemployment rate. Statewide, it's 5.1%. In the district that I serve, it's 4.4%. And so we are, in essence, fully employed. That creates an opportunity for us to work with business and industry to help incumbent workers progress and upgrade their skills, which then makes room for the emerging workers that we train. And so if we didn't have that strong connection with the business and industry community, then we certainly wouldn't be successful. In terms of accountability, in Oklahoma, 94% of the students who graduate with a certificate or a credential from a technology center are employed 6 months out. We track that religiously because that's the way that we maintain our relevance, to ensure that we're truly meeting the need. Now I say 94% are employed. I need to put the caveat, or they're continuing into another form of post-secondary education, because many of our programs require that next level or the cooperation with the 2 or 4 year college. And we do, although we're a separate system, we have cooperative alliance agreements in place so that students can get college credit for most of the programs that we offer on our campus. And so they are able to transfer that credit in at a very reduced tuition cost. In most cases, it's $6 or $8 per credit hour, which is a tremendous saving. Talked about the employment accountability. We also look at enrollment. We also look at retention. Again, we're responsible to our local citizens for their resources, and so we want to make sure that our programs are being effective. As a part of a statewide system, we also have legislatively dedicated monies to work directly with business and industry for training for industry programs. If we have a business in our community that's expanding, then there are some state funds available to help us ensure that their workforce is well trained. We also have some existing industry money as well as some dedicated safety training funds. So we have a variety of sources. To answer Brian's question, the takeaway from yesterday, I liked the conversation that is focused on making sure that career and technical education is not a consolation prize. For too many years, we've seen it as the kind of backup or secondary pathway to lucrative careers. And I feel, not only at this conference, but in other places that I've been recently, that career and technical education is starting to get the recognition that it deserves in terms of ensuring that the economy is strong. And we need to continue to further that conversation. One of the things that did hit me is sometimes when we talk about CTE, we typically will attach some form of a special population to that, whether it's economically disadvantaged or it's urban kids. But what we really need to realize is that CTE is for anyone who aspires to a career that requires it. And so we need to be talking about career and technical education as the pathway to careers of choice. And it doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is. If that's your career choice, this is the most appropriate pathway for you to get there.
Excellent start. Thank you, Doug. I mean, you think about all the comments that he made. Certainly, you could have an entire conversation around how Oklahoma has structured their transition plans and got a long history of all of that. And it was great to have your governor here to help showcase, if you will, the commitment, the legislative support, the funding, all the things that are necessary in order to build those pathways. And I love your takeaway moment too, this idea of not being a consolation prize. It's probably something that we should make sure that we embed in all programs in our schools so that people don't feel, especially young people, feel like, you know, kind of they're the left out crowd. So thanks for bringing that back to us, and I'll make sure that we ingrain that into part of our conversation here as well. So Sharon, quick introduction.
Well, good morning, and thank you. DeVry has been a longtime supporter of the Pathways Project, and in fact, we've been part of the development of this conference as well. I've been in education all of my professional life in all sectors of secondary and higher education, and at DeVry for the past 31 years. So there was life before the 31 years, which I'll just let go on. I'm going to give you my takeaway moment first and then tell you a bit about DeVry, which sort of follows Doug's. I've been doing this work for a very long time and been to a ton of conferences like this. And the consolation prize issue, I think, has always been one that we've lived with. And my epiphany yesterday was the communication strategy we need to have on a go-forward basis is all education is career education. That rather than us saying, well, if you don't go to an academic school, you can go to a career school, I think we need to recognize that we all go to a career school, and career of choice could be a philosophy professor, could be an electrician, could be a surgeon, could be a teacher, but very few of us, in fact, if I asked for a show of hands, had parents or significant others that said, go to school What's the goal? Nah, we don't care. It was to get a job somewhere down the road, after your PhD or 6 months after graduation or whatever. So for me, if we can be evangelists for anything, it seems to me we need to be evangelists for the fact that all education is about what we heard the governor say yesterday, you know, career, citizenship, and I can't remember now the third one. But so that's my takeaway. I think many of you may have heard of DeVry University, but probably don't know all of what the DeVry Education Group, which is our family of institutions, does. DeVry University began in 1931 in Chicago, and so we have campuses across the United States for DeVry, but we also have 7 institutions in Brazil that make up DeVry Brazil, where we educate about 27,000 students. And we span the spectrum of higher education, all of it career-focused, from Carrington Colleges, which offer certificate and 2-year programs, to Chamberlain College of Nursing, which offers nursing programs at the bachelor's, master's, and PhD levels, to medical schools, a veterinary school, and Becker Professional Education if you want to study for your CPA. Most of our time is spent on career-focused higher education at all those levels, but we also work in the secondary school area too. But if you think about the higher education community at this point, you know, we're working with students that are deciding to start post-secondary education right out of high school, or after they've started to work, or after they've looked for a job and haven't been able to find one, or after trying college once and deciding they wanted to try it someplace else, which about 50% of the students in the United States do, or to change careers. When we think about that just out of high school pathway, that's about 15%, and I heard yesterday even a smaller number, of students that are in higher education. And when I say higher education, I mean the expanse. I'm including anything post-secondary. What about the other 85%? The first in their family to go to college, the single mom, the returning student, these non-traditional students, which I always get a little angst about because we've really become the new majority. They are not hanging out on the quad, though I will tell you it was great fun in the 60s. They're typically first in their family. They often are working, many full-time, supporting their families. And if our system of post-secondary education doesn't adapt to meet their needs, we're going to have a very hard time meeting the level of post-secondary attainment that is necessary for our country to be competitive. So we have extensive experience educating this new majority. And recently, and it's, I believe, over on the side there, the Pell Institute released a report called Promising Practices Supporting Low-Income First-Generation Students at DeVry University, so sort of the title of what we're doing here. And so if you're interested in looking at that, we did bring copies, but what they found basically were 3 things. One was approaching student support services as customer service, or as we call it, service excellence. It isn't just about what happens in the classroom, it's all the wraparound that goes with that for a student body for whom college or post-secondary education in general may not be the norm. We hear about graduating from, I'm from Chicago, we hear about graduating from high school at dropout factories not being the norm. I mean, that's appalling. But then we think about how are we actually servicing students who make it through that in spite of the odds, and they come into an environment where certainly the adults or the faculty and staff in that environment typically come from a place where college was the norm, and how do they adjust to that? So by providing early and in-depth on-campus student opportunities to really bring students into the community and establishing, therefore, a sense of community around school. But what maybe surprise you is that we are also toiling in the secondary school vineyard. We have a regionally accredited high school called Advanced Academics that hails out of Oklahoma City that partners with over 200 school districts and charter schools to work as a virtual high school to do a variety of things, homeschool students, virtual high schools in states, working with U.S. Olympic athletes as they're preparing for the games. And the greatest and the most important thing from my perspective and satisfying is that we do work with school districts on dropout prevention and credit recovery, because it's also going to take us bringing students back into the secondary system either through that or GED to get to the numbers we want. So improving high school graduation rates is for us a huge piece of the work that I do with our foundation, and one of the reasons why we work with America's Promise Alliance to stem the dropout crisis. Their goal is to reach 90% high school graduation nationwide, and it's going to take multiple approaches, obviously, to do that. One of the programs that we do in working with them is a program called the DeVry University Advantage Academy that we started about 7 years ago in Chicago with then CEO of CPS, Arnie Duncan. Now he has a new job. And in doing that, it's a dual degree program, not just dual enrollment. And we think this is one of the ways that we get at engaging students to continue their education. It's a program that gives high school students the opportunity to earn their high school diploma and an associate degree within a 2 years and 1 summer period at no cost to the family. It bridges students from high school to college, and it is not a selective enrollment program. That was the key variable here. We were looking for the C student, which now I find that if I wanted to be the CEO, I would have needed to be a C student. If only I had known, I would have had a lot more fun in college. But, you know, we wanted students that were regular kids. I'm a CPS graduate. I wanted to be able to do something that would get those students into college. And we have people coming from over 60, young people from over 50 high schools, I'm sorry, in Chicago. And the one variable that we had was not grades. Yeah, you had to pass our math entrance exams because in the careers that we're in, math is key. But it was that you came to school 90% of the time in 9th and 10th grade, because if you aren't there, we can't do anything. And so that was the carrot and the stick, if you will. So it's been an incredibly successful program. Probably of all the things I've done in higher education, that thing that makes me tear up all the time. Our high school was named one of the top 10 high schools in Chicago. We have a 100% graduation rate compared to 58%, which is the CPS rate. And 84% of those students obtained their associate degree at the same time that they were finishing high school. So we think it's a model that helps get to the 90% that APA is talking about, as well as the 60% completion goal that APA has now joined with Illumina to support. The aha moment for us was that we thought students would get that associate degree and go right out into the workforce, because it was in network systems administration. It was in things where they could go get a job right away. What we found out was that they gained so much confidence about their ability to do well in school that nearly 80% of them went on to pursue a bachelor's degree either at DeVry or at the University of Illinois, Penn State, Jackson State, all over the country. And so these young people, products of the Chicago Public Schools, give me chills whenever I think about them. So what I've learned is that one size just doesn't fit all, and we've got to meet the students where they are. We've got to bust this false choice of career or college readiness. I serve on our P20 Council and co-chair with John Rico, who you heard yesterday, the Career and College Readiness Task Force. it's really integrated, it's really symbiotic. We've got to be ready to serve students in whatever pathway they choose. And I think this movement is doing it, and we've got to, at the end of the day, recognize that all education provides career training. Thank you.
Wow. I tried taking notes on all of that.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's absolutely remarkable. I guess I didn't realize all the work that you were doing. The idea of high school pathway through PhD, through DeVry, all the wraparound services, the great partnerships within the community. I didn't even actually know how Olympic athletes got their education. Now I have a better idea of all of that. But I think one of the things that really resonated strong was this dual degree concept. We have a lot of dual enrollment programs, but the dual degree where you graduate from high school with an associate degree, now we don't even call it high school at this stage, but you graduate with
they have prom.
a dual degree. They have prom, yeah. And the fact that it doesn't cost the student anything, that's pretty remarkable. We might want to know a little bit more about that as we get into some of the questions as well. So, all right, we're going to pass the baton over to Kathy.
Thank you. Really happy to be here. I want just a moment to thank you for your service, and just as an aside, it's a big day as part of Women's History Month, recognizing women veterans and military families in DC today. And so, sorry I can't be there in person, but let's all take a moment to thank them in spirit. Now that's my political. I'm from DC, so you have to allow me that. In DC, we have the American Association of Community Colleges, and we represent all 1,167 community colleges, depending on how you count. And we could do that exercise where you close your eyes and you picture a beach, and everyone's got a different one in mind, because if you try to picture a community college, some of them have 500 people, and some of them have 175,000 people. So we're all over the place. Probably if you close your eyes and picture one, hopefully you picture one that's in your community. And I think the word community and community colleges is essential, and it's part of what's been reinforced here. We are lucky to have leadership from our community college presidents, and Bryan is one of our faves. But they are really stepping up, I think, to take the initiative at places like this and with issues like this, which is really driving our community college agenda. The good news for community colleges, as you heard last night, and I was sort of squirming in my chair during dinner, because we don't have a lot of community colleges. We don't, maybe one person was community college in the room, so I was listening. Anybody? Yeah. So we can say whatever we want. But it's interesting to me that we don't have more direct community college representation here today, and I think that's part of our challenge. So thank you for those of you who are here on behalf of the colleges. The good news is we're getting all the attention. That's good if you know you've got a lot of siblings. The bad news is we're getting a lot of attention. So we really are at a point where community colleges have to rise to the challenges that are being proposed to us here, and that's why a lot of what was said yesterday really resonates with me. Let me try to put it in the context of our larger agenda, just to take a little bit different approach here, and then to my aha moment builds on theirs, which is a good thing. About a year ago, AACC and our new CEO, Walter Bumpus, released a new report called Reclaiming the American Dream, and it is really a pretty heavy-duty challenge to ask community colleges to redesign, reinvent, and reset the system. And within that are a lot of the things that I saw both in the Pathways report and heard yesterday. And these are actionable recommendations. We now have 112 college presidents who are voluntarily meeting as implementation teams to look at the variety of recommendations in this report and to figure out ways that we can really, as my father would say, give a kick in the pants to colleges to really spur them on to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And that is a lot of stuff, if you actually read this report, and it's available online, is stuff that won't be earth-shaking to you, but the fact that we are accepting this challenge as a system, and maybe that's part of my aha yesterday was system, is going to make a difference. And I really think it will, and it's timed beautifully with the things that are being discussed here in the last day and today. So I wanted to say that what I was hearing was through the lens of the report and what the colleges could actually do. I think within the report there are some clear recommendations that align learning, college, whatever, with work. And that is an aha moment for us, even though we haven't necessarily admitted it. We are really good at siloing credit, non-credit, degrees, certificates, all those things within our college. We divide people up according to how many hours they sit in a seat, primarily. And we need to get away from that. We need to look at what kind of learning needs to be done and how best and most efficiently to deliver that. And then we need to admit, as Sharon said, that we are preparing people for work. Go figure. I mean, I was a creative writing major, but you know, I still had to work. So I'm still trying to write creatively, I guess, in some form. But I was walking through, I took a break at the end of the day yesterday and walked through Harvard Yard, and I thought, what an amazing opportunity it is to think about being able to spend 4 years on a college campus like that, and who really has that kind of opportunity anymore. And so part of my aha moment just being here in Harvard was the have-not issues, and how we do get beyond the stigma of that if we can't get beyond the opportunity. The same stigma that exists for career and technical education exists and has existed for community colleges for a long time. And so how are we going to get the credibility and the excitement around the programs that we do offer so that we can serve those people who don't need a traditional 4-year degree? And we did talk about that yesterday, and I think we're on our way to doing that. Out of the report, the one aha I had, the thing that resonated with me the most was, and I quote, "Many adults over the age of 25 have discovered that community colleges offer programs leading to well-paying jobs in healthcare, technology, etc. But recent high school grads are often poorly represented in such programs, due in part to lack of information." And I think that is part of an image information campaign that has to happen, as well as general information. Until you get out there, you don't know what you don't know. And that's why programs like You're Up and others that help students understand what they need to know are so critical for us. So the other aha moment I had, and maybe this is because my head goes there, is our real focus on what are the credentials that we need. How do we need to revisit the credentials that we offer now? How do we stack them? How do we make sure they're portable? And then how do you make sure that they are going to be recognized by business and industry so that people can actually get somewhere and continue learning? And then how do we make it more important to have our students at all ages understand that we're preparing them for school and for work, without going back to some of the old rhetoric of that, but maybe finding some new ways of recognizing that. I'm really happy, and I thank those of you from industry who are in this room. I think the critical partnership with industry is evolving and getting us to places where we fought tooth and nail to try to get to until today. So I see great hope in that. I obviously see great hope in the community colleges, and we're happy to have them at the table.
Kathy, I would just say you had a great day. I have 5 aha moments
Oh.
down already. So
Aha.
it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I think you make some really good points. Trying to collaborate and connect a lot of the studies that have been done with the Pathways report. You know, fulfilling the American dream, reclaiming the dream. You know, the American Association of Community Colleges, the alignment of college and work, and how do we identify and make those credentials of value and make them real for folks. the lack of information, our image, we heard that yesterday a little bit as well. So I think you hit on some really key ideas that could help us advance our cause here with our conversation. So thank you for that update. And we'll pass it over to John and tell us a little bit about that fantastic campus that you get to lead.
Thank you. Yes, it's a beautiful place. I hope people have been to the Adirondacks. And just to get into a separate thing, the brochure explains what we've done and what we're doing. And I'm just going to quickly tell you how we ended up here at the Pathways. It was almost 2 years ago that we had to face what was happening on the campus. We had been a two-year school for 50 years. And then we switched to the baccalaureate. And the reason we did that was we were losing a lot of our associates to the fine community colleges that were growing in strength and reputation in our area. So we were thinking, well, the associate degrees are going to go away. And then, just by chance, and I still don't remember how I saw it, was the Pathways to Prosperity report. And so in May of 2011, I called Bill and I said, I want you to come up and talk to my faculty leaders about this, and maybe we need to do something. And we had a two-day workshop. We called it Reinvent, Reinvigorate, or Remove the Associate Degree Programs. And Bill came as the keynote speaker. And at the end of the 2 days, we decided we had to reinvent and reinvigorate. And we made that commitment, and you'll see in this brochure we handed out some of the things we've done. And part of that reinvigoration came from exposure to employers who were telling us, yes, we need these middle skills people, and in fact, we're getting baccalaureates applying for the jobs, and we don't need them. We need them at a lower credential level, and then we can work them up. So that's how we got into this program, and we're very much committed to it. And we're now actually looking at adding some of our two-year programs, and we're, of course, as you can see in the brochure, reinventing them and reaching out to other parts of our catchment area in the Northeast. But to come back to the very simple question about what were the aha moments, there were two for me yesterday. One basically gave me support for what we were doing, and that was a statement, one of them last night in the panel, which was, if you give a young person the impression, the real solid impression, that you care about their education, you care about them individually, then that can make a difference, whether they go off track and you get them on track or you keep them on track. And I'll just give you a quote from our college success coordinator, Virginia McAleese, who just 2 weeks ago received an award from the first year group in Orlando, Florida, as one of the top 10 college success coordinators in the country. And she said at that meeting, if you show a student that the institution cares about their success, they will pitch in and become successful. Now, of course, it doesn't happen 100% of the time, but that was something we've committed to. From the very first day, we interact with the student to show we care about them individually, their individual success, not a cohort, not a class, not a program success, an individual success. And the other aha moment came to me several times during yesterday when we heard people talking about the fact that the corporations, the employers, should be involved in the curriculum development. And this is something our faculty are slowly grabbing, some of them with reluctance, some of them with enthusiasm, but to hear it over and over again from this group, I can take that back and say, look, we have got to build our programs on what the employer wants. And one of the things that we have started with our employers we have 2 job fairs a year, is to tell them, tell us what we need right now, and then tell us what we need 5 years from now. But of course, we're recruiting a student who's going to graduate in 2 to 5 years. This year's knowledge may not be good enough 5 years from now. And we've got that started now. We've got the industry and the employers telling us that. But getting the faculty completely engaged with going to what we call the job task experts, the employer, is something I think is really important for us. And so that was very important to me, and I think that's very important for the further development of our college. And I just want to say one more thing. You know, the New York State assigns you a name when you apply for a charter, and of course I wasn't even born when we got ours, and it's called Paul Smith College of Arts and Sciences, and we are not. We're 50% forestry, with 35% hospitality, culinary, a few business students, and 1 or 2 classic liberal arts programs that have about 25 students in them. So we really know about professional training, and we care about it deeply. So we need those employers to tell us about it. But they know we can do it, because even in the depths of the recession, we have these 2 job fairs, and we were fully occupied in every one of them. And a matter of fact, in the last 2 years, we've had to expand the space we need for employers to come and recruit our students, because our tagline, it's about the experience, is exactly what the students get. They spend more time in the lab, in the field, in the kitchen than they do in the classroom. So it's really a hands-on experience. And to just end with one quote, which really drives everything we do, came from one of my faculty members when I first became president. And he said, you got to remember one thing about the Paul Smith College student. They care more about real work than schoolwork. So what we've done is found a way to keep them engaged in real work while they drink the Kool-Aid of higher education.
That's fantastic. Real work versus schoolwork. I'm going to use that, I think, with my daughter. I like that. I like that context. But I think you're absolutely right. It's a quote. I don't know where it came from, but I use it a lot with our faculty. People really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that gets at the heart of what you're saying. And it's that relationship building. And I think community colleges can help build that relationship just because of the organizational structures that we have. And how ironic, though, that I would have never guessed that those were your programs on your campus by the name of your campus. Yeah. So the image idea and the communications is really important. Now, I'm afraid, Lieutenant Betts, that you might be at a little disadvantage unless you were there yesterday. Were you there yesterday?
Okay. I missed yesterday, but just listening to the panel members, you know, my takeaway from the first gentleman from Oklahoma, same holds true for the military. This is for all branches, even though I'm in the Army. I represent the Army only. There you go. Oh, thanks, sir. We are not an occupation of last choice either, or a consolation prize. And that's one of the things that we try to drive home. I have recruiters across New England, from Maine down to the Cape and Rhode Island. And as we go out, we talk to high school students about what their future holds. Our focus is on them staying interested and engaged in school, staying healthy, and staying out of trouble. And we continue to focus, as we have in the past years, on how do we help schools do that for students. Because we are, again, we're not an occupation of last choice or a consolation prize. We're technologically advanced. As many of you know, I mean, our research and development in all aspects, from medical to blowing things up, is bar none probably the best in the world. And of course, we also have job training in 212, I believe, different fields. So if there's a job in the civilian world, we have it as well. And most of those fields, a high school graduate comes in, and from anywhere from 5 to 72 weeks is trained in one of those job fields. We call them MOSs. So if I slip into my acronyms, just stop me. But for us, a job is an MOS, a military occupational specialty. That's again, that's our focus. Is how do we keep kids interested? Because we have to take folks who are mentally ready to fight, ready to serve. So they've got to be a high school graduate. And as we get smaller, those restrictions get tighter. Tattoo policies get tighter. So a lot of kids now have a lot of tattoos. And they cannot serve if those tattoos are visible outside of the uniform like this. Kids who've been in a lot of trouble, we can't or we won't take them at this point. For somebody to say that maybe it's still a go to war or go to jail kind of time, it's not. That's again, we have to stay focused on that as we get out and talk to kids at earlier and earlier ages, because for us as recruiters, if the first time we see a kid is when they're a senior in high school, it's probably too late. They're probably already at risk for graduation in many cases, or they've already been in too much trouble to serve, because we can only waive so many instances. And that's typically at my level, and I interview kids all the time and try to make a determination based on how long ago and what level of trouble they've been in, whether or not they can serve. But again, that's the small stuff. You know, once we've got kids who are interested in serving and they're qualified, you know, our focus is getting them the job that they want, that they can do well, and then, you know, throughout the course of their career, whether that's 4 years or 20, you know, between structured self-development courses and institutional learning, we'll train those folks, and there's not an option to not be a leader in the Army. You're going to lead at some point, whether it's, you know, within the first 4 or 5 years of your career or after 20. But you will lead, and that's part of our curriculum as folks go through. Not only are you mastering your tasks that you have to do, whether that's use a rifle or fix medical equipment, but you're also going to learn how to lead folks who do those same things. And that's pretty much it for me.
So,
I mean,
so
that's my opening.
How long have you been in the recruiting side?
I've just about 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah,
I
so
bet, you know, the techniques have probably had to have changed quite a bit on how you recruit young people.
Well, you know, they have. That's something we're constantly changing how we do it. You know, as the economy gets better, we have to figure out better ways to do things. You know, economy gets worse, Army gets smaller. It just depends. You know, it's just constantly changing how we do things and how we, you know, how we get out there and talk to folks. But one thing that stays constant for us, at least in this area, is getting out and talking to kids and making sure that they stay in school and stay out of trouble.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm sure we'll have more comments and questions on that as well.
Okay.
But I'm going to switch gears just a little bit now to try to draw us all back to yesterday's comments by our panelists. So, John, if you could take the first question here, pull the microphone up. But the very first thing we heard when we all arrived on campus yesterday, and this was the opening comment from Ron Ferguson. Colleagues were nervous about this conference and the agenda his research was showing. His colleagues at Harvard were nervous about this conversation around CTE. Do you remember that? So my question for you, John, is who should be more nervous? John's colleagues that were talking about all of this, or all of us, that there are folks in higher education that don't want us to talk about all of this? What was your thoughts when you heard that comment?
Well, that was actually very appropriate because just a few months ago I was elected to the board of directors of the Council of Independent Colleges and Universities for New York State, which is overwhelmingly a liberal arts and science group, 131 schools, and 90-some call themselves liberal arts and sciences. And when I informed my director that I would not be able to attend a meeting because I would be here, her response was, "Why are you doing that?"
Really?
And so, yes, I think there is I won't call it fear, but a worry among liberal arts and science brethren that I talk to, that this is a challenge to their future. And some of you may know that the Council of Independent Colleges has now put a task force together of college presidents from the classic liberal arts and science to come up with a position paper to deliver to Congress to show that the liberal arts and science path is still the best path for the future of the country. Yes, they are worried. And I sit on the panel, and actually I went to a CIC conference, and what the title was of the conference was Humanizing the Professions. And I stood up at the meeting and I said, can we also talk about professionalizing the humanities? And the chair of the committee said, no way is that going to happen.
Really?
That was the comment to me. So yes, I think it is a very, very worrisome development, but I think we have the advantage.
So as excited as we all probably were yesterday, we must recognize that there is always another side to this conversation, and we may need to even draw in closer collaborations with liberal arts colleges and leadership, because if they're developing different levels of platforms, if you will, our work may never get together. So thank you for that comment. But immediately after the opening of the session, you might recall the CEO of Snap-on, Nick Pinchuk's comments. He's a very, very elegant speaker and certainly is on point with his comments. But one of the things, Doug, that he mentioned is that CTE has an optics problem. What do you think he meant by CTE having an optics problem?
Why'd you give me the hard questions? I'm not really sure what his context of that was. I think sometimes we have a limited view of what we're capable of, and we try to define things a little too narrowly. We're very targeted in on things like associate degrees or clock hours or class hours. And we know through our experiences, all of us in this room, that you can't define business and industry education in terms of seat time, but it has to be defined in terms of competency. So as we look at career and technical education or career education, what we need to be doing is meeting the demand of the industry, not the demand that our systems place upon us. And so we probably need to broaden our view of what career education really is and change what we're doing to meet that need.
I think you hit it right on. That's what I was thinking when he was talking about that as well. And that not only do we have to connect closer to the industry to better understand what and where our programs might align for pathway success, but also just the kind of the stereotypic view that we ourselves have of CTE. We tend to embrace what has always been CTE because we're comfortable with it as well, just like liberal arts is comfortable with liberal arts. And so changing that optics or that perspective could be a challenge on all fronts, and we have to accept it first. And if we don't, project our views a little different, no one else may view us different in the long run. So great comments. Thank you. Sharon, Bill Daggett. You remember Bill's presentation? He had the flip chart up there, and it showed the 4 quadrants, A, B, C, and D, and he expressed challenges for all of us around what quadrant A meant, quadrant B meant, quadrant C meant, and he suggested that quadrant C represented the college path, and quadrant B represented career and technical education, maybe not enough rigor, and that we were striving for quadrant D. And he was primarily focused on high schools, and those were the high schools that he studied. So my question for you is, where would you place our colleges and universities? Quadrant A, B, C, or D?
Quadrants A, B, C, and D.
All of them, okay.
And I say that, not flippantly. I think that all roads lead to what works best for the student in order to become the best whatever they decide to become. And I was really struck with the consolation prize and with the can we professionalize the humanity comments, because I see four-year traditional colleges and universities preparing students for careers. I know that in our bachelor's degree programs, we have a strong component of general education and critical thinking courses. I think that we see a fair number of, through articulation agreements, students from the community colleges who don't just go for a career, often go because from a financial perspective, they can get a quality two-year education before they specialize. And so I think it really is A, B, C, and D, and I think what we need to think about is the whole, I was going to say the whole child if it's secondary education, but the whole student. And I think all of those things play in at some point in time. If getting to D is academic rigor and skills development as something that's symbiotic, then I think we should begin that campaign of letting people know that that's what education does. I was a history major. Go figure, but it was very instructive to what I chose to do besides being a history teacher, which is the first thing I did. So I really think that every time we try to split this up, we are doing short shift to both. And I would like for us to figure out how to talk about education in a broader way that, yes, thinks about our economy. If we're talking about the Sputnik moment everybody's talking about, what forced us into that? Technology. So years ago, in the 19th century, I guess, I wasn't there, you could work with your hands, and maybe you didn't need to read the manual. You need to read the manual now, and you need to be pretty well versed in math to do well in a career that has a technical base. And what career, including today, creative writing, doesn't have a technical base? So I think we need to figure out how to all swim to shore together, or surely we will sink.
I think that's a great answer. You know what I should have done is had all the audience think about what your answer would be to these questions, because it would remind you of what was important during the presentations yesterday. But if you go back to what your aha moment was when you did your introductions, communication strategy going forward is all education is career education. That's very similar to how you describe the 4 quadrants. So I think you're right on track with all of that. So thank you for that. So Lieutenant Betts, you're at a little disadvantage. You didn't hear Hillary Pennington speak yesterday, but I think you can probably make this leap for us. She encouraged all of us to take a systems view on pathways, especially embracing the value systems that we bring to the table and helping students identify their own personal interests in the pathways that they choose. What does the Army do to align its recruitment strategies around the values and the pathways of opportunity? And I think you listed like 75 different, or 212 different pathways that are available. How do you align students with those pathways?
Yeah, sure. We start out with, we have a test that we can give to college, to high school students, and it's all services. It's SASVAB is the acronym. It's the Student Aptitude, Dave? Yeah, that's it.
It's a good thing you're here, Dave.
Yeah, it's the SASVAB. So basically, and all kids can take it or they don't have to take it. There's no requirement. It's not, and it's not necessarily a military test. But what it tells a kid after they've taken the test is what they would be good at based on the answers they've given throughout the test. And many of you have probably taken similar tests some point in your careers, with just to hit a different name. But that's kind of, we'll go off of that. So we get some, you get an overall score, and then you get these different line scores that tell folks if they would be really good as, you know, in a mechanical field or a technical field, whether they'd be really good at something electronic, etc. And then we can go from there. And, you know, as we talk to students about what they want to do with their future, you know, we can refer back to that test and those scores with, well, you did really good in this. You know, what are your thoughts on all these different MOSs that we have? The jobs that we have that would fit that.
You'd be pleased that at lunch we heard the governor from Oklahoma talk about a new electronic labor market information data management system that's helping to align. If you went to the session, you would have heard the Secretary of Wisconsin's Workforce Development suggest that they're also developing a new database system to help align programs for schools and for job seekers. So I think you're right on. There's probably some technology-driven strategies that can help us build those pathways that we might not be aware of, or we need a partner to make ourselves more aware of them. Thank you for that. So Kathy's probably really nervous because she's wondering what question could he possibly ask, and was I paying attention at all the sessions enough to answer this question? Okay, so Andy Sum. Do you remember Andy Sum? He's the gentleman that was a labor market professional that told us all of the glooming data about youth employment. And it's pretty frightening when you think about where we stand. In fact, I believe he suggested that we are at the highest non-employment element in the history of the United States since they've been starting collecting this data. So we have a tremendous amount of young people that are not working and are not engaged in developing those work ethics and those skills and identification of where those pathways might be. So in your work, Kathy, at AACC, what are the challenges and the opportunities that this might provide for us?
So I think we need to be honest about how we engage students. And there was also a lot of talk yesterday. I'm not trying to field the question down, but beginning much earlier than we're even thinking in terms of middle school or sooner. I keep looking out at Tim Lawrence, who came in late, but Tim heads up SkillsUSA. I didn't mean to point you out for that. But you're right. We're glad you're here because Tim represents SkillsUSA, which is, if you're not familiar with that, is a really great model of how students get involved in considering the trades and careers actively while they're in high school. And so a lot of my thinking goes to how do we get people excited about a career without tracking them. And Volker, you could probably answer that from the European side. I think as a country we haven't done a very good job of that. So part of my mind goes to how do we get some actual experience. There are several people here, I think, who are involved in apprenticeship programs, internships, those kinds of things. Thank you. I was actually at AU for 10 years, so I knew you then. We need to get back to all those models and start them early, and maybe find ways to accredit them or make them more of a bridge so that students benefit from them and seek them out more directly. I think the other answer to the question is how do we let people know that they can have a base of skills that really are portable so that they're not self-selecting into something that's going to be limiting, but something that's going to be broadening. And we don't do a very good job of that, I don't think, on our campuses or with our counseling or young people. But if we go back to a broad base of competencies and look at the portability of those, I think we'll get people excited about options, able to pivot in a certainly what's going to be an evolving workplace, a global workplace. How do we make those global perspectives available to them, all those things, rather than think, and I do worry a little bit, because I understand the importance of doing a job match with labor market information. But if I'm a student, we just did a project called the Virtual Career Network out of AACC, which was originally in healthcare, profiled 80-some careers in healthcare. We have a project that Bryan heads called SEED, which looks at green jobs and sustainability. And unless you look broadly at those fields, I don't know that you can care about what you're doing before you know about it. And I think that's really important.
I think you make some great points, and actually it ties right back to your aha moments about system change and alignment and image and getting our message out at an earlier age. So I think all of these things, it's remarkable when you think about what inspired you yesterday, and that was a big key we heard last night about inspiring people toward their passion, and you all draw a lot of that out in your comments today. So my notepad is empty with questions, and they're probably relieved with that. This is your turn to ask questions. Also, your opportunity to give us some guideposts that I can add to my notes for the report out of what you thought was important. So we have a microphone. Thank you. Could you pass it around a little bit? Thanks. So we have a question here first, right up front.
Yeah, I wonder about what, for all the panel, to what, well, except for the Army, because you definitely have work-based learning, but how much work-based learning is there in your activities? And especially, Doug, you have such a close relationship with the employers in your community. Do they provide internships? Is there, because there's a employer engagement at the advisory level, at the curriculum level, but in the end, it's what people actually do in the workplace that sometimes inspires them and also provides the employers with the knowledge about what's really happening.
And that's where we have an advantage for our post-secondary programs over our secondary programs, is that we are able to place students into on-the-job training or internship programs. The other benefit for post-secondary is because we're so aligned in providing education and training for specific industries, a lot of that is not place-based education, but those classes are held at the industry location, using their equipment and many times using their employees as instructors. For our post-secondary education, we don't have really stringent educational requirements in terms of instructors have to have a certain degree. But what they really need to have is that technical knowledge and the skill sets to impart that technical knowledge to students. So it is like an apprenticeship. Now, I would like to add a comment on the youth employment. And one of the real concerns that I have, and I speak not only from an educator but also from a parent of two sons who are 16 and 17 years of age. Once upon a time, policies were not in place that restricted youth from working as they are today. And it is very difficult for youth to find employment opportunities that allow them to try on specific careers. And our young man from the FFA is not with us now. He was here earlier. But I remember a year ago there was a national policy issue around agricultural youth and the requirements for even family members of farm families, whether they could work on the family farm below a certain age. And so what we've done is we've set up policy to protect, which is a good thing. But sometimes we get some unintended consequences from that. And so when you look at the opportunities for youth to work, they're much more restrictive today than they were when we were growing up. And I think that contributes also to some of our work ethic issues, but it also trickles into post-secondary education and whether or not those students exhibit the type of student work ethics that we like to see when they come to our institutions.
Very good. Any other comments on work-based?
Yeah, just 3 specific things given the range of our institutions. Those programs that have clinical requirements obviously require students to have work-based learning as part of the attainment of their degree. We also have required senior projects for students at the end of their baccalaureate program that requires them to actually go out and work with an organization and do some real good, so that schoolwork and real work are the same in terms of that. And then in our graduate programs, a capstone course that does a similar kind of thing, where it's take what you have learned and apply it in a real life situation.
And actually, I'm going to defer to you, Bryan, and put you on the spot.
Sure.
Because I think one of our best examples is if you go to Gateway Tech, I always tell the story that it looks like a Snap-on factory, I mean, parts of it, or whatever, because of your strong partnership. So I don't know whether you...
Yeah, I think absolutely. You draw out some really good points. Not only the relationships with the local employers, because it doesn't always have to be work and a work site. Bring those employers to your site. And we branded our campus around those world-class companies. So Snap-on, S.C. Johnson, Modine Corporation, Train Corporation, you can go down the list. You see them very present on our campus. They use it as part of their research base for their company. So there is that transfer of knowledge base going on even while you're in a traditional type classroom setting. The other key piece, I think, is that I didn't hear a lot about it at the conference yet, but the whole idea of service learning. And I know SkillsUSA does a lot with service as well as the other student organizations. You can really develop a lot of those skills by having students become involved in their community in different ways. So thank you. We have another question here and then a question up front. Dick?
Yeah, and it's more of a comment, and it keys off a little bit at what Sharon had to say. But when I was in the Chicago area most of my life, once a year, either Crane Chicago or the Chicago Tribune would come out and knock community colleges for graduation rates, you name it. They would do that, and you know, the University of Chicago started the community college movement over 100 years ago. It's Joliet Junior College is the vestige of that. We're going to get down to is what can Harvard do for us in the future, and that's going to be, you know, part of the wrap-up conversation. It can be the next champion, and they have a bully pulpit, next champion with higher education itself, specifically 4 years. In the Chicago area, we organized, I was at Moraine Valley Community College, we organized all the community colleges in that area with Governor State University. You know, they had a mission to take 2-year graduates, but we worked it out with every 2-year degree. It didn't matter if it was fire science or health science or automotive or whatever, could go to there intact, no tests, no problems, to a bachelor's in technology and business. Students there would get additional coursework in finance and management, and you name it. They could now be not only the automotive person, but they could be the owner-operator. They could be the regional manager for Midas Muffler. They could take that into the MBA program or a PhD program. What we did was off the big part of the problem where parents come in and say, no, you don't want to go to a community or technical college. You don't want to be an auto mechanic because you should go to Harvard. You're going to go to Harvard. And we got rid of that problem, that piece of that problem with parents, that they could say, yes, because I see you have a future all the way up the ladder. And it keys off what Sharon's doing. It's a piece of the problem, and to me, it says what Harvard could really do. Besides a lot of research behind what we're doing and things they can do, they have a bully pulpit that can help us with higher education itself.
I'm smiling, Dick, because I think you're so right. And ironically, when I told my wife, Lisa, who is a high school principal, because I was a CTE student myself and went through the SkillsUSA at that time, VICA programs and so on, I told her I was going to Harvard for a conference, and she laughed. I said, you're going to Harvard? So I think you're right. There is an opportunity there, the pulpit idea, the opportunity that we're here, and I know visiting with Tim yesterday, a lot of us felt like this is quite a unique watershed moment, if you will, for us in this conversation. And if we can help the organizations here and organizations like Harvard to stimulate that conversation at another level, that would be a terrific outcome of the program. So yes, question up front.
I have a worry about a concept that we get hung up on a lot, and that's tracking kids too early. And my worry about it is that they're more general skills that people learn in narrow tracks. Narrow tracks teach narrow sets of job skills usually, but they also teach persistence, attention to quality, problem solving, communication skills, working with clients. If you're a computer networking person, the most important thing you can do is convince your clients to use the network right. Because if they use it wrong, there's nothing you can do technically to solve that. So there are lots of general skills, ones we don't measure particularly well, but are not narrow at all. And then I was thinking, we all change careers. So are there ways to show the general qualities that are learned in specific occupations?
Directed toward anyone? The whole group? Directed toward the whole group?
Yeah.
I'll start. I think there is, and there is a guy who's actually at this conference, Mike Fitzpatrick, who some of you may know from Massachusetts, who is the superintendent for Blackstone Valley Vocational Regional School District. His students who go in, it's a CTE school, graduate at higher rates, get college admission at higher rates, not than Boston Latin perhaps, but regular high schools with regular kids. I think that it goes to this notion of years and years ago in Chicago, I was a sub while I was in graduate school. We were teaching math. If you taught kids the abstract numbers, and I was doing this on the South Side where I grew up, they would look at you like it was Greek. If you said, here's $5, go to the store, get this, this, and this, and bring me back the correct change, they knew how to do it. And so, is that a kid who's math deficient? Or is that a kid that learns math in a more applied way? So, yes, you can teach the history of something and hook the kid or the young person or the old person on why they care about that. If we don't find the why I need to care about algebra or why I need to care about history, I lose them before we start.
John, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I interpret your question a little differently, but and I think it related to the general skills we want all students to have. And I'll be just blunt about it. We take part in the NSSE survey, National Survey of Student Engagement. They talk about these high impact practices, and our school has one of the highest scores for that because, contrary to what you see on TV with the celebrity chefs, when you're in a kitchen, you're working with a team, and you have to communicate, or you're not going to be successful. We teach surveying. Have you ever seen a surveyor out by themselves? They can't do it. They've got to work with a team. We, in these technical and hands-on programs, you're always working with a team, you're always communicating. And so those general skills are there. And as one of our advisors to our surveying group said, you got to remember, every surveyor is going to stand up in front of some town board, hand in a written document, and then defend it orally. And we forget that. Those are the humanity skills that we're putting into our kids. They're drinking the Kool-Aid and while they're learning the skills.
Very good. We have time for one more question. Someone have a microphone right now? I think the woman in the red sweater back there has been waiting patiently. I'm sure our panelists will be willing to stay for a few minutes afterwards too, but I want to make sure that at 10:20 those of you that need to leave can.
Thank you. Good morning. This question is for Lieutenant Colonel Betts. I represent a group of about 55 industrial manufacturers, and we have a great need for industrial skilled craftspeople, and we've often talked about how we can recruit more veterans. And one of the obstacles seems to be quantifying or translating the skills that they've learned in the military. And I was wondering if the military is working on anything like that or has anything like that, a translation matrix that would match like skilled craft skills or certifications or even degrees of any kind, or community college credentials of any kind on the outside.
We do, and that gets into, I think that's a little more difficult for us, in a lot of aspects, but as our soldiers leave the military, they're given the credentials that go with the job they've done over the past few years. Of course, it has a name, but it's a certain form they take with them, and also along the way. I don't know how often it's done, but it's over my career. It's probably been 5 times where I've received a review from the Army that says, based on the jobs I've had and the schools I've gone to, here are the qualifications I now have. So it's kind of a transcript, if you will, of all that structured self-development learning that I talked about earlier that we do throughout your career, plus the institutional learning. It's all captured in one document. So folks receive that as they leave. I think more often than not, soldiers lose that immediately upon departure, because that's what we do. Especially if we're 22 to 25 years old, don't need that, so they toss it. But it's easy for them to get that again through their local, especially here in Massachusetts, through the veteran services officers that they have in every town in Massachusetts. And of course, they can do it through the VA and all these other states, and it's available online. As we get more and more technologically advanced, all that stuff will be available for soldiers to get to and former soldiers. So it is out there, and it may not be where we need it to be just yet, but that is something that we continue to work on, are those certifications and very specific about what someone has done as a soldier and how that translates to the civilian world.
Very good. Doug had a comment too on that.
Yeah, and actually that's an interesting question. In Oklahoma, we've started an initiative on how do we assist veterans coming back into civilian life. And one of the requirements that we have is that we evaluate the military transcripts and to provide information to prospective students about which of the courses that they took during their military experience or through their work experience translates into advanced standing credit, so that they get advanced standing and recognition for the great education that the military service provided to them. We also, through our state agency, have hired a specialist to work with that transition. If you go to the Army's website, you can find a very comprehensive document on how to interpret military transcripts that it provides a lot of information that a lot of times the servicemen and women don't really understand either. And so we've charged our financial aid coordinator on our campus to work with those transcripts to ensure that we're giving credit where credit is due.
Just real quick on that. 2 other thoughts for you. We also are working with American Council on Education and CALE, Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. We haven't said prior learning assessment in here. We probably should. But this is a way of interpreting the transcripts, starting with the veteran population, and also seeing how they can get credit for their prior experiential learning as well as their codified learning. And then the other, I'm not as familiar with manufacturing, but a really good example of how that's been done is the Troops to Energy project that's been done out of the Center for Energy Workforce Development. And they have an online tool that matches the MOS with the skills and does pretty much what you're looking at.
That's a really good question because Sharon has a response also.
Well, it goes to the resume side rather than the transcript side. And so one of the programs we've been working actually with the White House and U.S. Chamber of Commerce on is hiring our heroes and actually sitting down with veterans and military spouses to take their resumes, which were earned in the military, and help them to develop their resume to make it applicable to civilian jobs. And find that you're right, it's a communication issue, because clearly if you're learning teamwork and leadership, those are things that any employer wants. How do we take the things that are defined in the 220 skills or whatever and move those to, and these are skills that are applicable in civilian work, and we're happy to do those. You know, they're free of charge workshops in any city where we're located.
Thank you. We are out of time. So you've been a great audience, including Mark. So thank you all. You deserve a round of applause. Let's thank our panelists one more time. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kathy, John, and Lieutenant Fitz. Thank you all very much. Great job.